It's okay.
1972, and has occupied multiple senior posts while extensively preaching worldwide. Maharaj is expert at delivering seminars and discourses on vast Vedic literature, and more recently has facilitated the Bhakti Shastra and Bhagavatam courses. I now hand over to His Holiness Bhakti Chaitanya Swami Maharaj, who will read, extract, and reveal to us unparalleled nectar of the glorious Srimad Bhagavatam.
Wow. Hare Krishna.
So devotees, there might be very few of us here because of the water constraints and stuff, but a lot of them are following on.
Oh.
So His Holiness Bhakti Chaitanya Swami Maharaj ki jai.
What a lovely introduction. Thank you. Now I think we need to turn the volume up. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Can you all hear me okay? Yeah? Okay, now that's pretty good. Thank you. And what a lovely call tone. It's just very nice. So, devotees, Hare Krishna to you all. And welcome to our seminar, The Essence of Srimad Bhagavatam. That is what it is called, The Essence of Srimad Bhagavatam. So let us just begin first of all with our classical prayer of introduction. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. First of all, thank you all very much for coming to participate. I have noticed that I would say there are about 3 times as many ladies as there are gentlemen. There's some deeper meaning in that, I'm sure. But anyway, thank you all for coming. And I really hope you'll find it interesting. I think if you listen carefully, you will find it very interesting. We are here as students. Therefore, I do advise that to get the most out of it, you take some notes. I leave that up to you, but you know, there's some research was done, and they say if someone attends a seminar, like a multi-part presentation on a particular subject, then if you just hear and you don't take any notes, then you may retain up to 7% of the information which was transmitted. If you take notes, you may retain up to 50%. Just take notes. If you take notes and later go over them a few times, you know, really try and focus a bit, then you can retain up to 94%. This is what they say. So therefore, I advise you, because it's meant to be educational, really. Yeah, so I advise you, if not today, if you brought already something for taking notes, well done. If not, I'd advise you to tomorrow night at least. Okay, so let us begin. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharne Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Shatarne Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shivas Adi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya evacha Paditanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So what we're going to do, or how we're going to do this, shall we say, we are today, tomorrow, Thursday, and Friday, not Saturday, but then Sunday. So that means 4 sessions we're going to be having, including the Sunday program, the regular Sunday program, but it's going to be part of the seminar. So devotees, you might be surprised to hear it, but we are going to go through the entire Srimad Bhagavatam from the actual beginning to the actual end. And I'm sure you're all well aware it is a big book, and there's really a lot of information in it. Obviously, in 4, say whatever, hour and a half to 2 hour sessions, something along those lines, it might end up being 6 to 7 hours altogether. We are not going to go through the whole thing in detail, obviously, but we call it an overview, just looking over the thing. And so we'll go through canto by canto. And as we go through canto by canto, we will, at least touch on each chapter. What is the essence, you could say, of what's discussed in each particular chapter, and show you how it all fits together. Because it all really fits together. It is one unit. It's not just a whole lot of different things about different things, but there's a real sequence to it, to the different subject matters and the development of the storyline. It's highly systematic, but because it's very big, it tends to be a bit imposing, just to look at it. 12,000 page volumes, or at least several 100-page volumes. Wow, it can be a bit frightening. But actually, Srimad Bhagavatam is very approachable. And once you sort of get the hang of it, and what is the sequence and how it fits together, then I think you'll see at least it will be, if you haven't read the whole thing already, at least it'll make the whole thing much more approachable and not so intimidating just on the basis of the volume. I mean, the quantity, the size of the thing. So that's just for your encouragement. Let us now look at the book itself. So what is this book? Now, I'm going to tell you a few things right now, which I'm sure quite a number of you are well aware of, but that's okay. Prabhupada said, repetition of a good thing is good. So this book is the record of the conversation between Shukadev Goswami and Maharaj Parikshit, when Maharaj Parikshit was cursed to die in 7 days by the bite of a snake bird. So as we go through, we'll see Shukadev, Parikshit, they're everywhere. However, it is their conversation being retold by someone else. It can, make it a little complicated, you could say, but not really once you understand how it works. Sutta Goswami is explaining the conversation between Shukadev, Sutta and Shukadev, two completely different people. So Sutta Goswami is explaining, because he was there when they had their conversation, their discussion. He was there along with many other people. Even Lord Shiva was there, Vyasadeva was there, Narada Muni was there. All these sort of big, important, spiritual people were there. And Sutta Goswami was there also. So now the format is really that Sutta Goswami is not repeating, but just representing in his own words to some degree, not just verbatim, but he's repeating the discussion he heard between Shukadev and Maharaj Parikshit. And if you've got that, you've got an important part of the whole picture. If you can just bear that in mind. And Sutta is reciting all of this to a group of devotees called the sages of Naimisharanya. This group of sages, headed by the chief, his name was Shonaka Rishi. So he is interacting with Sutta quite a bit. Now, having said that, as we go through the 12 cantos, we'll see that other people pop up, appear. And for example, Uddhava and Vidura. There are conversations within the conversations. It's like a network. But anyway, as we come across these different people who are being referred to, we'll make it all clear who's who and what's what. Uddhava, Vidura, then Vidura and Maitreya. Almost the whole 3rd and 4th cantos It's Maitreya instructing Vidura, but Shukadev Goswami explaining that to Maharaj Parikshit, and Sutta Goswami explaining it to the sages in Naimisharanya. You're not lost yet, are you? Yeah. So yeah, that's the way to see it, that it is a conversation being recited in a conversation between some other people, and it includes a number of conversations. Yeah. Between all these amazing people. And that's Srimad Bhagavatam. And it is all, because Srimad Bhagavatam, just like we all know Bhagavad Gita, but Bhagavad Gita itself, the words Bhagavad Gita, means something. Gita means song, and Bhagavad means of Bhagavan, of God. So Bhagavad Gita means, the song of God. Yeah, Krishna. It's the song of God. And Srimad Bhagavatam, Srimad means beautiful, and Bhagavatam basically means story of God, Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That's the title, the beautiful story of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So the essential conversation is Shukadev Goswami instructing Parikshit, and Parikshit asking questions, the questions being answered. That's the essential, that's like the body of it. But what are they discussing? They're discussing about Krishna and different forms of Krishna and different devotees and different personalities connected with Krishna. This is what Srimad Bhagavatam is. So at the end, if you really study it nicely, because the discussion is just back and forth, this about Krishna, that about Krishna, a question about Krishna, an answer to the question about Krishna. It's all focused on Krishna, and therefore it's said that if you study it very nicely, by the time you reach the end of the 12th canto, you will have realized God. You will have realized Krishna. Yeah. So anyway, let's get into it. And the way I'm going to do it is, first we'll do canto by canto. So first canto first, and we will show you how there are so many sections in a canto that you get a few chapters which are discussing more or less the same subject. And then, after that discussion on that particular aspect of Krishna consciousness is being concluded, then a discussion going on for a few chapters will be there on another theme. I use the term theme. There are these different themes, a few chapters at a time. Right, so in the first canto, I say, not just me, but those who present seminars on Srimad Bhagavatam, we generally agree there are 3 sections in the first canto. The first section is chapter 1 to chapter 3. And the subject is that it's an introduction, plus it is introducing and defining the subject matter of Srimad Bhagavatam. 3 chapters, 1, 2, and 3. Just introduce and then, introduce the whole picture of the Bhagavatam and then define what's the subject matter. And what is the subject matter? Well, we already told you. Krishna. Yeah. So, then the second section is from chapter 4 to chapter 6. And this is, in very simple terms, the story of Narada Muni and Vyasadeva. Narada Muni and Vyasadeva. Vyasadeva is the father of Shukadev, who is the speaker. So Narada and Vyas get together and they have a whole thing about Srimad Bhagavatam, and when we get there just shortly, we'll go into that in some detail. And then the third section is the rest of the first canto is from chapter 7 to chapter 19. And it's a bit of a mixture to some degree. It's a bit of a mixture, but the essence, what it really comes down to, is introducing Maharaj Parikshit. Introducing Maharaj Parikshit and the whole situation of, I mentioned Maharaj Parikshit being cursed to die in 7 days, how that came to be. And then how he meets Shukadev Goswami. That's in the last chapter of the first canto, he meets Sukadev, who is then going to start instructing him in the second canto. It's a bit of a mixture. There are some other things there, but rather than get into too much detail, make too many sections, and it can be easy to get a little confused. We'll just focus on this, that it's really introducing Maharaj Parikshit and his situation, which leads up to the recitation by Shukadev to him. However, having said that, an important part, which is, somewhat is different actually, but it falls within the chapters dealing with Parikshit and is being cursed, is that Lord Krishna's leaving this world is discussed, and the Pandavas leaving this world is also discussed. There are 3 chapters. In amongst these, what is it? It's like 12 or 13 chapters which are, the main theme is Parikshit, but there's sort of like a sub-theme of Krishna leaving this world, and the Pandavas leaving this world, and then Parikshit takes over as the king. Right, so that, that's the basic idea of the first canto. The whole first canto, there you go. Now you know the whole first canto. Good on you. But let's just have a look in a little detail. So the first section is chapters 1, 2, and 3. And the first chapter, you may have noticed, it's called Questions by the Sages. And these are the sages in Naimisharanya who Sutta Goswami meets with and tells them the whole story of Shukadev and Parikshit's discussion. Yeah. So questions by the sages means questions by that group, the sages in Naimisharanya. And I want to just run through this, through the questions. They're interesting. There are 6 questions. Some are questions, some are just requests for information, but some are actual questions, what is this? And some things are just, they're requesting, can you explain about something? Or please tell us about something. It's not really a question. But the chapter's titled Questions by the Sages, and it's referring to these 6 questions or requests. So the first one, make a note, because you see, in a certain sense, the whole Srimad Bhagavatam is answers to these questions. Yeah, it's a fact. The whole Srimad Bhagavatam is addressing the points raised, either as actual questions or just requests by the sages in Naimisharanya. So the first one is in the first chapter, verse 9. What is the absolute and ultimate good, Shreya, for people in general? Shreya, how's that? Wow, they're talking about you. Sort of. But Shreya means ultimate good. There's Shreya and Preya. Preya means immediate good. Shreya means long-term good. Yeah. So what is the absolute? Anyway, you just look. You've all got, I hope, Srimad Bhagavatam, if not with you, at least at home. So you can look it up. Haribol, what happened? Oi, okay, it's back. Oh, we lost volume. So, okay, first question is verse 9. Well, I'll read it. What is the absolute and ultimate good for the people in general? Then the next question is verse 11 in the first chapter. And it's a question, what is the essence of all scriptures? And the third one is a request. It's not really directly an actual Haribol. Now, what's going on here? Just got to give it a whack every so often. Just a good whack. Give it a what happened. We can try. I'm ready for anything. I'll just dash it every now and then. Give it a what happened. Wow. Okay. 1 minute. So, right.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Okay, let's see how we do with this. So, okay, yeah, we're up to number 3, sorry. It's verse 13 of the first chapter. And it's not a question as such, but it's a request. Please explain to us those teachings imparted by previous masters, acharyas. For one is uplifted both by speaking them and by hearing them. So that's the third, the chapter's titled Questions, but questions, requests. So explain the teachings which have been given by the great acharyas. Then number 4 is verse 17. And it's also a request. Tell us of the acts the Lord performs. Yeah. Now, anyway, if you look at the purport, you will see Prabhupada explains this verse in terms of what the Lord does in regard to creating the material world. Although it sounds like the request is about the pastimes, but is particularly referring to creating the material world. So number 5 is a request also to describe the pastimes and adventures of the Lord and the Lord's multi-incarnations. Yeah. So that's really, the avatars, their pastimes like that. Whereas the one before, verse 17, it's more about what the Lord does to create. And then the last one is verse 23. And basically it is a question, where have religious principles gone after Lord Sri Krishna has disappeared from this planet? Where have they gone? And do you know where they've gone? They're in Srimad Bhagavatam. That's where they've gone. Yes. And we just can't go into too much detail. But this question is answered in a nutshell, if you want to make a note of it, in the first canto, chapter 3, verse 43, is the answer in a nutshell to that question. seeing Krishna's left this world, because the Bhagavatam was spoken after Krishna departed from this world. So where can we find religious principles? And the answer to the question is in Srimad Bhagavatam. Okay, so now I'm going to go on to the second chapter. We're still in the first canto, in the first part, just very briefly, that the second chapter is something like the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita. If you know what the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita is about, contents of the Gita summarized, that's the title of the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita. So similarly, the second chapter of the first canto, it's all introduction. It's all introduction, as we said, setting the scene, giving definitions about the subject matter. So the second chapter is basically establishing particularly the process, devotional service. Devotional service is the most wonderful thing. And I mean, it's titled, it's not, I promise it's not me. Haribol. Divinity and divine service. So just to give you an idea, I am going to read a couple of verses from the second chapter, which will give you a clearer idea of how it is addressing the process of which is devotional service. So here's verse, I'll read verse 16, just the translation. O twice-born sages, by serving those devotees who are completely freed from all vice, great service is done. By such service, one gains affinity for hearing the messages of Vasudeva, or Lord Krishna. Then the next, so that's, the process, hearing about the Lord. Serving the devotees. And the next verse, Sri Krishna, the personality of Godhead, who is the Paramatma supersoul in everyone's heart, and the benefactor of the truthful devotee, cleanses desire for material enjoyment from the heart of the devotee who has developed the urge to hear his messages, which are in themselves virtuous when properly heard and chanted. So again, it's Krishna. If you're into hearing, then he cleanses your heart from all your nonsense, material desires, etc. And verse 18, by regular attendance in classes on the Bhagavatam and by rendering of service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed, and loving service unto the personality of Godhead, who's praised with transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. So this is all the process. It's all about the process, introducing the process, which is going to be recommended, which is devotional service. Devotional service with a foundation of hearing and chanting about Krishna. So now, the third chapter is all about the incarnations. Or not all about. I mean, the whole thing's about the incarnations. and it's titled, Krishna is the Source of All Incarnations. And like I said, without going into it in detail, the basic point is there's a whole list of incarnations. Actually, I forget how many there are, but I think it's at least 25 or something, or a little more even. But anyway, it's something like that, around 20 or so, different incarnations, beginning with the Purusha avatars, Karanadakshay Vishnu, Garbhadakshay Vishnu, Shiradakshay Vishnu, then going through, then you come to Lord Varaha, Lord Vamana, then you come to Lord Ram, Lord Ramachandra, and then Krishna and Balaram are mentioned, and then Buddha, and finally Kalki. They're all listed out with a little explanation about each one. But, and this is just of extreme importance, devotees, fasten your seatbelts and, make a note of this, is that verse 28 in the 3rd chapter, it's the only one I'll read in the 3rd chapter, establishes Krishna as the original Supreme Personality of Godhead. His name has already appeared in the list of avatars. Well, like I've said, I don't want to complicate things, but this list of avatars, you know how it arises? It arises because there's the question, can you please tell us about the avatars of Bhagavan? So then they're all listed out as avatars of Bhagavan. But then verse 28, after the list is finished, verse 28 establishes that Krishna is that Bhagavan, who all these others are incarnations of. He's not just an incarnation of Bhagavan, but he is the Bhagavan, the original form of God. So, verse 28, Ete Changsa Kalapumsa, Krishna's tu Bhagavan Swayam, Indrari Vyakalam Lokam, Mridayanti Yuge Yuge. All of the above mentioned incarnations are either plenary portions or portions of the plenary portions of the Lord. But Lord Sri Krishna is the original personality of Godhead. The Sanskrit term is Krishna's tu. Tu means but. But Krishna, Bhagavan Swayam. Krishna is, Swayam means the original, the very one, the actual one. Krishna is the Bhagavan, the possessor of all opulences, the ultimate. You would have noticed if you've read Bhagavad Gita that you get so many verses. Arjuna asks something, Krishna replies. The first verse where Krishna starts replying, what does it say? Shri Bhagavanu Vacha. Because Bhagavan is really the Sanskrit word, the equivalent of God. Yeah. Whereas Krishna is the name of God. You could say, like president. It's a post. Bhagavan is like a post, God. And every president has a name. And Krishna is the name of our president, of God. Yeah. So there's not one place in Bhagavad Gita where it says Sri Krishna Uvacha. It's only Sri Bhagavan, to make it clear, God speaking. So yeah, Krishna is Bhagavan Swayam, the original form of Bhagavan, of God, the original possessor of all opulences. So then we go on to the second section, verse 4 to verse 6. Chapter 4 to chapter 6. And as we said, it's the story of Narada Muni and his interaction with Vyasadeva. First of all, chapter 4. I would advise you just to make a brief note of the basic idea of each chapter, because I'll touch on what is the basic idea of each chapter. So, chapter 4 is about the appearance of Narada, how he, not exactly how he was born, but his childhood, and then how he grows up, and he becomes a great devotee. Then he dies, and then is reborn in his next life as the great sage Narada Muni. In that lifetime, which is first described, he's the son of a maidservant, like a very simple working girl. But he gets some good association. Then his mother dies, bitten by a snake, and he just goes off and wanders around, visiting places of pilgrimage and studying, and then he dies, and he's, by the Lord's arrangement, he is born as Narada Muni, the great sage. So then, chapter 5, so that's the essence of, that's definitely the essence of chapter 3. Chapter 5 is, we find that Vyasadeva, Shukadeva Goswami's father, and Vyasadeva is the compiler of all the Vedic literatures. Vyasadeva is feeling frustrated because he's finished compiling the Vedic literatures, which is like the sum total of all knowledge, the perfection of all knowledge, but he's not satisfied. When you've got the perfection of knowledge, you should be satisfied. But he's not. So, Narada Muni appears there on the scene. Narada Muni is already actually, it's introduced at the end of the 4th chapter, how Vyasadeva's feeling frustrated. But then Narada comes in at the beginning of the 5th chapter. And Narada, who is already the spiritual master of Vyasadeva, chastises him that Sri Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Devi Ki Jai, that the reason you're feeling frustrated is that you have not described Krishna sufficiently. You haven't described Krishna sufficiently. So, I have a habit of confusing things by introducing too much detail. There was already a form of the Bhagavat Purana was already existing. But Narada Muni told Vyas, do it again and focus more clearly on Krishna. So that's what happens. That's what happens in chapter 5, basically. That Narada is chastising Vyasadeva, that you've explained karma kandya, materialistic religion, very nicely, but you haven't explained Krishna nicely enough, or sufficiently quantitatively. So you must redo the last Purana, the 18th Purana. You must redo it. So, so what Narada does in the 5th chapter is Narada gives Vyasadeva a process of meditation by which Vyasadeva will realize all these things about Krishna, which he'll then record in Srimad Bhagavatam. So Vyasadeva goes into meditation in the 5th chapter, and at least probably more in the 6th chapter actually, he goes into meditation and realizes the Bhagavatam. Right. So then, right. So he then instructs Shukadev. I'll just keep it simple. That Narada, in these 3 chapters, 4, 5, and 6, Narada chastises Vyas for glorifying materialistic religion too much, and tells him, you're feeling frustrated because you haven't glorified Krishna enough. So then he gives him a process of meditation for understanding Krishna more. And then Vyas compiles the Bhagavatam, and then he instructs Shukadev in the Bhagavatam. And there you go. So now Shukadev, the son of Vyasadeva, by the end of chapter 6, Shukadev has received the Bhagavatam from his father Vyas, who received it through meditation that he was instructed to do by Narada. So we go on to the 3rd part of the 1st canto, chapter 7 to chapter 19, just the rest of the whole canto, right to the end. And the main thing, as I told you, the main thing is Parikshit is introduced, and how he ended up being cursed. That's all introduced, because it's on the basis of the cursing that Shukadev then instructs Parikshit on the Bhagavatam, and Sutta was there and he hears it, and now he's reciting it to the sages in Naimisharanya. So, devotees, in chapters 7, 8, 12, 16, 17, 18, and 19, 7, 8, then 12, then 16 to 19, there's the story of Parikshit. The story of Parikshit, how he appeared, I'll mention a little bit about that, but how he appeared, then there was a whole lot of drama surrounding him appearing, and then how he became king, and then how he got cursed. These are all described in chapters 7, 8, 12, and then 16 to 19. And, in other words, this is now the story of the Bhagavatam, because the story of the Bhagavatam is Shukadev instructs Parikshit. So this is how it comes to be that Shukadev ends up instructing Parikshit, which is the whole of the rest of the Bhagavatam. So yeah, what happened? Parikshit was the son of Abhimanyu, who is the son of Arjuna. But Abhimanyu was married to Uttara, and they were very young, still in their teens. She was already pregnant with Parikshit when Abhimanyu was killed in the battle of Kurukshetra. Yeah. So now Uttara is pregnant with Parikshit, and one fellow, Ashvatthama, tries to kill Parikshit within the womb of Uttara. But Krishna enters the womb of Uttara, and Parikshit sees Krishna in a four-armed form. He's in the womb. And the Lord protects him from this weapon. It's like a very special weapon, Brahmastra weapon. It's actually the same weapon that Lord Ram used to kill Ravana, the Brahmastra. So this Ashvatthama tries to kill Parikshit within the womb before he's born, because he knows that's the end of the dynasty. The Pandavas, the 5 Pandavas, they're now somewhat older. They're grandparents. So they're, beyond the fathering children stage generally. They're already grandparents. So this Ashvatthama wanted to stop the line that the Pandavas were in, ruling the earth. But then Krishna appeared and saved Parikshit within the womb of his mother. And therefore Parikshit was named Parikshit. Parikshit means basically he who is searching, inquiring, searching. Where can I find that person who protected me within my mother's womb? That's the name, that's what Parikshit means. So anyway, it's a bit of a long story. In chapter 9, there's a bit of a diversion in that Bhishma Dev, we're right at the end of the battle of Kurukshetra. Bhishma Dev has this benediction: he can only die when he wants to. No one can kill him unless he wants to die. And his body is so full of arrows from Arjuna that you could not put 2 fingers down between any 2 arrows, but he was still alive. He was still alive. So Lord Krishna came in the 9th chapter. Lord Krishna comes when Bhishma Dev is lying on this bed of arrows, just completely full of arrows. And Bhishma instructs Yudhisthira how to rule, because Yudhisthira is going to become the king now, having won the battle of Kurukshetra. So then in chapters 10 and 11, it's all very nice, but it's kind of, like an incidental thing. 10 and 11 are describing how Krishna, after the battle, left Hastinapur, where now the Pandavas and Yudhisthira, they've taken over the throne. So some days after the battle, Krishna leaves Hastinapur, which is the capital, and returns to Dwaraka. It's very nice how all the devotees and people said goodbye to Krishna. How the residents of Dwaraka received Krishna. An interesting little diversion in chapter 8, Queen Kunti offers prayers to Krishna. That's nice. There's some beautiful prayers there. So then, chapter 12 is about the actual birth of Parikshit. And then 13, 14, and 15 are all about Krishna leaving this world, or sort of Krishna having left this world. 13, okay. Anyway, we won't get into 13 so much, there'll be too much detail. But in 13, Vidura instructs Dhritarashtra, who was the father of the bad guys in the battle of Kurukshetra. And so Dhritarashtra leaves home. But then, so that's 12. But 13, where am I? No, that's 13. But in 14, Yudhisthira notices many bad omens, and he thinks maybe it means Krishna's left this world. And then Arjuna comes to Hastinapur from Dwaraka and confirms, Krishna has left this world. Because Shreya, Maharaj Yudhisthira did not have WhatsApp. Can you believe it? You can't believe it, can you? There was life before WhatsApp. So he didn't know that Krishna had left until a few weeks after, until Arjuna came from Dwaraka. If you know where that is, right on the west coast, it's about 1,500 kilometers to what is now Delhi. And, coming on horseback takes a while. So then Yudhisthira understood that, yes, all those omens I saw, they were indications that Krishna's left this world. So then Narada Muni comes, and in chapter 15, basically Narada Muni says that, you came with Krishna. You came with him because you're his associates, now he's gone, so you should go. So therefore you'll see chapter 15 is the Pandavas retire timely. The Pandavas leave home. Yudhisthira hands over the throne to Parikshit. And they all just go to the Himalayas. And what happens in the Himalayas is not so much discussed in the Bhagavatam, but in Mahabharata it describes as they're walking deeper and deeper into the Himalayas, just one by one they just drop. They just die. And finally, I don't know who's the last, maybe it's Yudhisthira himself, but they all just die. And if you ever go to Badrinath in the Himalayas, there's the road of the Pandavas is there. Yeah, going off into the Himalayas. So the disappearance of Lord Krishna is established in chapter 14. Chapter 15, Yudhisthira is instructed by Narada that you must leave because you're part of Krishna's entourage, so your business is over, and they leave. Then, chapters 16, 17, 18, and 19, it's all about Parikshit. First of all, 16 and 17, that it's really interesting. I mean, it is just so interesting. How now Parikshit is ruling. By the time you reach chapter 16, Parikshit is already ruling the world. And as the king, he goes out to check out what's happening in the kingdom. And what does he find one day? He finds one Sudra, low-class person, dressed up like a king, harassing a cow and a bull. Yeah. And that Sudra is not just a Sudra, but it is Kali, the personality of Kali Yuga, the presiding deity of Kali Yuga. Kali himself, not Kali, Kali Ma, not Kali, Kali with a short A, Kali. This is not Kali Yuga, it is Kali Yuga. Yeah, the age of that person, Kali. So yeah, it's Kali. He's already cut off 3 of the 4 legs of the bull. And so the bull's only got 1 leg left. And he's harassing the cow. The bull is Dharma, the personality of religion. The cow is Mother Earth. Yes, Bhumi, Mother Earth. And they're both being harassed by Kali, who's going to kill them both. But he's already cut off 3 of the 4 legs of the bull, of the personality of religion. And, I can just let you, every now and then I'll give you just little insights to certain important points which are made here and there. So one very important point which is made in these 2 chapters, 16 and 17, is that Maharaj Parikshit arrives on the scene and sees there's the cow and the bull, and there's this, it's actually Kali himself, but he looks like a Sudra, he looks like real low class, but he's disguised as a king. And so Parikshit understands what's happened. But for sort of procedural purposes, in order to do things properly, he asks the bull, who cut off your legs? It's pretty obvious who cut off his legs. Kali's there with a sword in his hand, covered in blood. Yeah, but still, to do things right, he asks him, Parikshit asks him, who did this to you? And you know what the personality of religion says, the bull? He says, I don't know. Yeah. And he says, well, you know, some people say things like this happen to people because of their karma. Anyway, you try and locate those verses if you've got the Bhagavatam. You know, it's deep. But the point is that the surface level of what happens can be very misleading. Means, like, if someone walks up to you and punches you in the nose, which I hope never happens, but if it does, then of course on the surface, if someone asks you, who punched you in the nose? They say, it was him, of course, because it's just obvious. It's on the surface. But the question is, why did he punch you in the nose? Of course, there may be reasons. Even on the surface, there may be reasons. But ultimately, he punched you in the nose because previously you punched someone in the nose. And now you're simply getting a reaction, that's all. And the person who actually punched you is just sort of like an instrument for your karma. Doesn't mean that he's not going to get any karma for punching you. That's for him. But for you, you got punched because you punched someone. So in other words, you can't blame him. You cannot really blame him. You can only blame yourself. Yeah. So in other words, it's subtle. It's really, really subtle. So anyway, Parikshit, understanding what's going on, is just going to cut the head off Kali. But Kali surrenders to him and takes shelter of him. And as a king, Parikshit cannot kill anyone who takes shelter of him. Can't do it. Can't kill him. So Kali says, you know, I'm taking shelter of you. You must give me somewhere to live in your kingdom. And he says, I can only live where there's meat eating, intoxication, illicit sex, and gambling. I cannot live anywhere else. I'm not able to. So you must give me such a place to live. But there was no such place. So they're stuck. But what there was one person on the planet, which was the kingdom. The whole planet was the kingdom of Parikshit. There was one person who was thinking of hoarding gold. And Kali was allowed to go and live with him. And in this way, Kali Yuga began. Kali Yuga is based on the hoarding of gold. So, okay, anyway, so then we come to chapters 18 and 19. And 18 is Parikshit is cursed. He's out hunting or doing something, and he somehow becomes overpowered by hunger and thirst. He just cannot, it's just too much, he cannot handle it. So he's got to find something, at least something to drink. And he sees a little ashram. So he goes there, and there is one sage, Shamaka Rishi, who's deep in meditation and oblivious to what's going on externally. And Parikshit asks him, "Can you give me some water?" But the sage doesn't react because he's not externally conscious. And so Parikshit becomes angry and goes. But when he goes, as he goes out, he sees the skin of a snake, and he wraps it around the shoulders of the sage. The sage's son, Shringi, sees this. And on one hand, he's only, I think he was about 12. He's had enough training. He knows how to curse. But he doesn't know how to withdraw curses. And he's not cultured enough to be self-controlled. So he curses. He finds out this is what's happened. It was the king. He curses Parikshit. You die within 7 days by the bite of a snake bird. Parikshit had left. Shamaka Rishi goes and tells Parikshit. And Parikshit decides, it's the will of the Lord. Because I'm too materially attached. This is what he's doing to break my attachment. So Parikshit immediately leaves everything. No farewell party. So long, it's been good to know you and all the best for your retirement. None of that. He just goes. He just walks out and goes to either the bank of the Ganges or the Yamuna. Generally it says the Ganges, but Prabhupada, quoting, I think, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, gives an explanation that it really was the banks of the Yamuna. So he goes there to fast to death, or to fast and focus till the snake bird comes, and then he feels he'll be ready. So he's very famous devotee, incredible devotee, coming in the line of the Pandavas, who are just the most incredible devotees and personal associates of Krishna. So many sages and demigods, and Lord Shiva comes, and Vyasadeva himself comes, and Narada Muni comes, because they want to be there when this great devotee leaves this world. So there they are with Parikshit. Shukadev has not arrived yet. He's coming. But there's Parikshit. He sits down, and there are all these sages and all these great personalities, and he asks them, please tell me, what is the duty of someone who's about to die? So they're sort of conjecturing, well, it could do this, do that. It's not clear. Then, in chapter 19, Shukadev walks in. And Shukadev's really unusual. He's 16, but he is what we call an avaduta, totally otherworldly. So he's just wandering around with no clothes on. But he's actually great sage who has been educated in the Bhagavatam by Vyasadeva, his father, already. So when he just walks in, everyone recognizes this is the most advanced person. And so he's immediately given the seat of the speaker, and he starts speaking, or he gets ready to start speaking. Yeah. And the first instruction that he gives is Ante Narayana Smriti. Ante, at the time of death, at the end, you must remember Narayan. Yeah. So anyway, devotees, we're just getting off to a slow start just to sort of, get a focus on things. So now the whole scene shifts to on the banks of the Ganges or Yamuna, and Shukadev is instructing Parikshit. But Sutta is describing that to the sages in Naimisharanya. Yeah. So now, devotees and friends, we're now in the second canto. And here, in the second canto, there are 3 sections. I think it's the shortest canto in the whole book. It's only 10 chapters. So the first part is from chapter 1 to chapter 3. And we call this different stages of progress in Krishna consciousness. Yeah. The first stage is meditate on the universal form. That's described in chapter 1. The second stage, which is described in chapter 2, is meditate on the supersoul. Not just the universal form, what Arjuna saw in the 11th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Not just that, but the actual supersoul. And then the third chapter is pure devotional service. So there are 3 levels. Yeah. I'll just say a couple of words further about these chapters. The thing is, the universal form, like I would imagine you're all familiar enough with Bhagavad Gita to be familiar with chapter 11, when Arjuna sees the universal form, and it's such a staggering experience for him. He just can't handle it at all. So he asks Krishna, please withdraw it and let me see you as you are. So Krishna then withdraws the universal form, shows himself in his 4-handed form, but then withdraws that form and shows himself in his 2-handed form. That's Bhagavad Gita, chapter 11. So the thing is this, devotees, and it's possible some of you might be surprised to hear this. The universal form is imaginary. It doesn't exist. It's a concept. It's just a concept. There is no universal form. Because, for example, in the universal form, the eyes are the sun and the moon. But the sun and the moon, they're just the sun and the moon, actually. The mountains are the bones of the Lord, like the spine. You know what the spine's like? Yeah, the bones in the body of the universal form. That's the mountains. But the mountains are the mountains, actually. Yeah. And in the universal form, the Brahmins are the head, the Kshatriyas are the chest and the arms, the Vaishyas are the waist, the Sudras are the legs. But actually, the Brahmins are the Brahmins. It's just a concept. They're like that. They're like the head of the universal form. So I think that's all I'll say about that. But that's the way it is. That's the way it is. Yeah. Like, you know, in chapter 10, chapter 11, Krishna shows the universal form. In chapter 10 in Bhagavad Gita, he explains different parts of it. Yeah. Like, I am the sound in ether, I am ability in man. Yeah, these are some things. I am, amongst fishes, I am the shark. Amongst men, I am the monarch. Yeah. So yeah, and Krishna says, I am the gambling of cheats. And that's chapter 10. And then chapter 11, Arjuna says, can you show me that? How you are those things? And Krishna shows the universal form. But don't worry. You know, amongst fishes, Krishna says, I'm the shark. Don't worry. If you ever see a shark down at the beach, don't go swimming out to it. That, oh my Lord, I've found you at last. Don't do that, because it's just a shark. But amongst fish, it's the most outstanding. Or I am the gambling of cheats. If you know, at the casino, right? If you're ever stupid enough, I mean, if you ever go to a casino, then, and you find, you know, the real cool gambler who's making loads of money, don't offer arti to him, all right? Because he's just a gambler. Anyway, yeah. So yeah, the universal form is presented in the first chapter for people who are not able yet to accept that the absolute truth is a person. But by thinking in these terms, this concept, you know, the sun is one of the eyes, the hills here, they're the bones of the Lord, and etc., etc., then people get the idea that God, or not God exactly, the absolute truth is a person. Then they can come to the level in chapter 2 of accepting the supersoul who's controlling everything. And then once they have sort of gone beyond that, then they can accept Krishna and really become devotees. So then the second part is from chapter 4 to chapter 7, and it's an introduction to the process of creation. Chapter 4 to chapter 7, an introduction to the process of creation. Because, you know, we'll find here and there there's discussion about this, discussion about that, and then suddenly there's discussion about the process of creation. And, you know, sort of on and off, there's discussion about creation. So, let's just go through this. In chapter 4, Parikshit wants to understand Krishna more. Well, just an interesting little point is I mentioned how Parikshit became just overwhelmed with thirst and he just lost it. And he offended Shamika Rishi. But the next day, or maybe the day after the next day, but just immediately afterwards, he sat down and he fasted and he didn't sleep or drink for 1 week. So the fact that he became overwhelmed and just lost control and offended a great sage is the arrangement of the Lord. Yeah, by Krishna's arrangement he became bewildered, so the Bhagavatam could be spoken. So in chapter 4, he decides, I want to understand Krishna more. Please explain about Krishna, but sort of from the beginning. Don't immediately start with Krishna in Vrindavan, but let's talk about how Krishna creates this world. So you see, chapter 4, the title is The Process of Creation. Then, at the end of chapter 4, it's interesting, a little, a conversation within the main conversation starts. Main conversation, Shukadev, Parikshit. But now Shukadev says, I want to tell you about a conversation between Narada Muni and Lord Brahma. So the greater part, if not the whole, of the rest of the second canto is Narada Muni and Lord Brahma discussing about the process of creation. Or I should say, Shukadev Goswami is describing how Lord Brahma explained the process of creation to Narada Muni. Do you get me? Are you with me? Yeah. He's not just explaining it himself, but he's reciting the explanation of the process of creation and the supremacy of the Lord within the creation by Brahma to Narada, because Narada is the son of Lord Brahma. So in chapter 5, this discussion between Narada and Lord Brahma begins, and Narada questions Brahma, where do you get your power from? Narada had been thinking that Lord Brahma was the most powerful because he knows that he created the universe. But now he's thinking that I see you worshiping someone else. So that means your power you're getting from someone else. Tell me about that someone else. How do you get your power? So Lord Brahma explains in detail, and you got to keep your head together when you read it, otherwise you'll get confused. But in detail about the process of creation, from the glance of the Lord, which transforms the pradhan, the unmanifest material nature, into the mahatattva, which means material nature, where all the different component parts are now separated from each other. In pradhan, they're all mixed together. So and then through the whole process, the modes of nature appear, then the senses appear. Do you get me? It's a bit complicated, I'll be quite frank. But that's what's being discussed. Then in chapter 6, where are we? Chapter 6, is called Purusha Sukta confirmed. But it's the same thing. It's Lord Brahma explaining the process of creation step by step through these few chapters. But he now, in chapter 6, he explains it in the same way that some famous prayers in the Rig Veda explain the process of creation. And those famous prayers in the Rig Veda are called the Purusha Sukta. Purusha meaning the Supreme Lord in this context. Yeah, it's interesting. So drawing parallels between this very well-known prayer, it's 16 verses describing the process of creation in the Rig Veda. So it's consistent. They're consistent with each other. And in the course of that, Lord Brahma, because the creation so far, glancing over the material nature, then all the different component parts come out, then the senses manifest, the modes of nature manifest. This is all before Lord Brahma starts creating. Because he takes all those things and makes the planets and makes all the species. So there are two stages of creation. First stage is by the Lord, second stage is by Lord Brahma. So in chapter 6, Lord Brahma explains how he appears. All these things have already been going on. But then he appears from the lotus, coming from the navel of Garbhodakshaya Vishnu. And he doesn't know what to do at first, but he hears a voice. It's the Lord saying, Tapa, do austerity and meditate, and then you'll understand what to do. So then, then Lord Brahma starts his creation. In the course of this, well, we're just about to finish actually, but Lord Brahma, who's, okay, so what does Lord Brahma do next? Wow, it's amazing. You want to know? Come tomorrow night and find out what Lord Brahma does. It's amazing. Srila Prabhupada ki